What's up everybody, this is Tucker from MACkiteboarding, and I came down here to one of our local spots, Stony, to take a look at the ice and see how it's flowing out, seeing when we could potentially get back on the water here. But I figured while I was here and it was beautiful and sunny out, I'd give you a quick review of this board, the Omen SuperMarine, SuperMarine, not submarine. Last thing we want to do in refoiling is to go under the water, so it's not submarine, it's SuperMarine. Excuse me. And what this is it's the big brother to one of our shop favorites, the Omen Flux. So figured I'd sit down, give you the scoop on this board, my personal review after riding it for quite a while now in each and every way, in each and every sport, and kind of where it fits in and why this board might be an interesting choice for your quiver, or maybe not. So stick around if that sounds interesting and we'll get going. All right, as I've already mentioned, this is the Omen SuperMarine. This is essentially the bigger brother to the Omen Flux, which has been our favorite board as a mid-length, as a high performance mid-length for quite a while. And in chats with Greg from Omen, we've decided, hey, why not, let some heavier riders or some guys that need a little more volume, girls that need a little bit more volume, more stability, or maybe you're just in a spot where it's really light wind, why not size this thing up and make some adjustments and optimize it for, heavier riders or lighter powered conditions. And really that's what the SuperMarine is. It's launched alongside the other high-performance surfy mid-length from Omen called the Emissary. So that one's even smaller and higher performance than the Flux. So if you're looking for a real high wind shredder, especially in the waves, that's one to look at for that. But if you're a bigger rider, if you're more in the beginner intermediate level, if you're looking for lighter wind performance, or perhaps you're looking for a board that'll cross over between winging and para-winging, or even sup for some riders in the biggest size, the SuperMarine could be for you. Now what's special about it? It's a mid-length, so it's a little longer, a little narrower, and I would say a little thinner even than most models of this same volume. So in mid-length, as we've tried to talk to everyone about before, the volume isn't as critical. In super light winds, yeah, you still want some volume under your feet. For intermediate or advanced riders, probably, your weight in kilograms plus or minus 5 liters is a good indicator for a mid-length like this in super light wind. But as soon as you get a little bit of power in that sail where you can get up pretty consistently, then dropping down, is not a hard thing to do at all. So if you're, up and riding confidently already, you're riding in decent winds, on these kinds of boards, you can jump down, 20 liters, 25 liters, versus traditional wing boards that you may have been riding previously. So that's something to know. So we'll go bouncing in and out of that scenario a little bit in this review, whether you're riding this as a super light wind, we'll call it sub 10 knots kind of light wind machine, or whether you're riding this board in adequate wind, we'll say that's 10 knots or above with the appropriate wing and foil. So that's kind of the reference for me. I can ride almost anything, in 10, 12 knots plus with the appropriate wing and foil. But as soon as you get down below that 10 knot threshold, for me, I really want something around 90 liters. I'm 95 kilograms in weight. So that's kind of where it plays out for me. And, if you're a beginner, you might want to size up maybe a tiny bit more than that. But again, the key is the length here, because the length gives you that easy planing. It helps lower the entry rocker, lower that drag. You're not pushing as much water before you're planing. And the top speed on the water is higher. So when you need to reach those higher speeds for liftoff, if you're riding a higher performance foil or just a thinner foil, then this is going to get you there more easily. So what are some cool features on this board? First, we'll start with the traction pad. just because it's probably the most basic thing we could talk about here. We've changed to a new diamond traction on this. It's a brushed diamond traction. It's got great grip with no need for any kind of surf wax or anything else. Even with booties, if your booties are kind of worn out and don't have great grip anymore, this is still going to have good grip. I've ridden it in some of our kind of slimy inland lakes and stuff, and even with the algae and the slime, it still grips really great. So I think that's a really positive change for the deck pad. Whereas in the past, in really cold conditions, or if you have just kind of some worn out booties that didn't grip quite as well. So the new deck pad is a nice upgrade there. It's not a super aggressive diamond traction, so it's still pretty calm on your knees and your feet, and it's not gonna like tear up your wetsuit or anything like that. It's still pretty toned down, but there's enough there to give you great board feel. Swap your feet around and slide your feet around when you need to, but really lay into it as well. Well, we're in the middle of the board here. We'll talk about the placement of your strap layout here. So in the back, pretty simple. Straight line down the back. I don't anticipate a lot of people are going to be jumping on this board necessarily, at least not at a high freestyle level doing backflips and stuff. So the back foot strap is, you know, maybe not necessary, but it's there if you want it, or if you want a foot hook like I sometimes ride. That way you can slide in and out of that really easily, but send some jumps when you're ready. It's there. Front strap options, you've got down the middle, so you can go there, V-strap. You've also got independent side options here. So a lot of times what I'll do is go from like here to here with a long strap, and that positions my front foot, my dominant stance, kind of in that perfect zone with a little bit of room to adjust depending on how I'm riding and how fast I'm going and what foil I'm on and all that. So that's really my preferred one there if I'm going to use a foot strap, which a lot of times I'm not going to be on a longer, bigger board like this. Just give yourself total freedom and a totally clean playing surface here to move around and not have to worry about it. But some people just do like them, especially, you know, light wind if you're having a hard time getting the nose up, which really isn't a problem with this board, but if you are, one front strap can help with that, just to give you more lift on the front. So there are your foot strap options. Now, in terms of the construction of this board, we can talk about next because it's beautiful and it's right here in front of you. The Omen boards are all made at the Apple Tree factory. So they're designed and tested in the US and worldwide here, headquartered in the United States, but the production is in Portugal at the Apple Tree factory. So this isn't coming out of China, Thailand, Arab Emirates, any of those countries where a lot of the board factories are produced in mass. These are made one at a time in the Apple Tree factory by riders, by people that care about these sports, and really they go the next level in making the construction a higher level as far as I'm concerned. It's got 100% waterproof, high density foam core. So that's what's on the inside, that's it. There's no sandwiching with, you know, PVC and EPS and all these fancy things going on the inside. Bam, just a solid core, CNC machined, and then it goes into the autoclave vacuum bag system, which is something that Apple Tree has perfected over the years. These boards are super bomber, also quite lightweight. They also happen to transmit foil drive signal quite well, which is unique for a full carbon board. So if you're into foil drive, you're curious about foil drive, these, in our experience, have been no issues, which is a really great thing to know. The tracks are not carbon, the tracks are high density plastic, like most boards in the industry, but it won't have an issue transmitting the foil drive signal. So it's good to know that getting into a board that you should be plug and play with foil drive and not have any of those problems. So that's kind of the front of the board here. I'll flip her around so you can see some of the details on the back. Kind of the same color structure on the back here. White tail dip with the splash, which is a really cool color option rather than just the clear black carbon, I think. If you decide you don't like the white, you can always bust out the Posca pens, the paint pens, and get your artist on down there, or get your kids out with the crayons or whatever, It's a blank canvas on the white, so you can make it what you want. And then if you decide you don't like what you had on there, get out the alcohol, maybe a little sandpaper, wipe it clean, do it again. So it's pretty cool to have the option to customize your board. You know, maybe you want to write your address on it if you're in an area where you might lose your board and want to recover it. So there's that option, but personally, I think it's really neat to see what people are doing with different kinds of artwork on the white, or maybe hand it to a friend that's more artistically inclined than you are. But really cool to see that. So let's see some more of that in the future, guys. It's really neat to check that out. On the bottom here, this is where all the magic happens on this board, as far as I'm concerned. Other than the dimensions, of course, which the dimensions are fantastic. Let me remind myself, this is the 95 liter. They're not giving me the dimensions. I want to say it's around 21 inches wide, I forget. We'll post a link to the description here. It's been a while since I've looked at the exact dimensions, but 5'11" and long enough, not too wide. The thickness is there to give it to you when you have that ultra light wind. So if you've been on the 84 liter Flux and you're like, man, it's such a killer light wind board, I just wish it had a little bit more volume because I'm heavier. Because when I'm slogging and I hit that lull and there's just no wind, it's hard to stay on your feet. You start sinking. I'm in that boat. I love the 84 liter Flux, but I end up on my knees if I'm in really patchy wind, like on an inland lake, or if you need to kind of taxi your way out to the wind line and you want to do that standing rather than kneeling, then having a little bit more volume under your feet can help with that and keep you on the surface in between those little pumps of power in those lulls of the wind. So that's something to be aware of and compare against the Flux 84. The bottom design here, very low entry rocker, comes through almost halfway down the board. So that gives you insane efficiency. You need almost no speed at all, and this board's on the surface planing already. The length helps with that, but also just the fluid design of the rocker on this board gives you that efficiency, that easy to ride kind of rocker line where, you know, even if you're kind of skipping off some chop or waves or punching through a little bit, it starts right planing again. It bounces off really good. It's not too abrupt and hitting and then slowing you down and hitting and slowing you down. I can't say enough about that low entry rocker and how effective it is on these mid-length boards. Getting into the middle of the board, we have kind of a blended chine in here, and it kind of starts up here. It's a little more steep up here in the hull area where it's just going to cut smoothly through the water there and not slap. Through the middle, it's sort of blended, more rounded, but also flattening out. So we're getting into the planing area of the board now where you want it almost flat, very efficient, so that once you get up there, it's just skipping through with little drag, giving you stability out here on the rails for just balance, because that's about where your knees are, is right in here. And then out the back, just a slight bit of rocker to help you lift off so it's not dragging tail, and just to help that water flow through efficiently and smoothly. A dead flat bottom works quite well up until that bottom isn't dead flat if your balance isn't perfectly on it. So having just a little bit downset helps with stability, it helps with efficiency and release when that board's coming off the water and you start to kind of nose up and fly. So extremely efficient, again with the rocker out the back, very smooth, and they've really nailed that. That's a big part of the magic of this board. The chines start to get a little harder as we get into the back half of the board here. You'll notice it's almost a right angle here where it's really releasing that flow now. So we're past the widest part of the board. You want that flow to release cleanly. That's going to give you your maximum speed and that slippery feeling. It's also going to help the board release from the water when that starts to happen. And our chine is here to make so the rail isn't hitting down unnecessarily. If it was just dead flat, that chine would not be there and the rail would touch down and slow you down more easily when you're up and riding. So we have a light chine there. It really blends well with the natural kind of keel over that you have when you're winging or para-winging. It's not overly aggressive like a lot of brands are using. And being a little flatter, what that gives you is more planability, more lift and stability from the board. especially in that back half of the board, you know, where that's the part of the board that's always in the water. A lot of times once you start moving, you're leaning back a little further. That's where that stability comes from. And the lift generated, even with how fat these chines are and how out of the way they are in a hard turn, they're still lifting. They're still providing that balance, that lift that you need in those lighter conditions, or if you're still learning. That really helps with that. And they've really found that kind of fine balance, and not many other brands in the industry are using such shallow chines, and I'm a big fan of them personally. I think you'll see more of it in the future. So that's the shape. It does what it's intended to do. Getting into the track boxes in the fin box here, the track boxes themselves are placed a little further forward than the Flux, and the reason for that is these boards are longer. You're going to be still riding them kind of from the middle of the board, so there's less nose to swing around. And then also where you're planing, where you're planing on this board is a little bit more central, where the middle part is, where the stability is. So you can stand at the same position whether your board is on the water or whether you're up and flying. That's a real key to ease of use, especially for newer riders who aren't used to shuffling their feet to change, you know, for different speeds you're riding or different conditions. Having it just right there, you almost never need to move your feet, is really key for having that. So the foil box is a little further forward. It also allows foils that want to be more up in between your feet and be compatible with those. Some of the old Armstrong stuff kind of does that. But then also the track box is quite long. So if you find you have a foil that really has a lot of lift, or you have a really long fuselage and you need that mast a little bit behind your foot, you can definitely still do that with this track. So that is a really careful consideration when we're designing these boards, when we're consulting on these boards, is making sure that track placement is maximized for, you know, the kind of foils that everybody's riding in the industry. And everything I've tried on it so far has worked fantastic. Most have been kind of right in the middle, which is right where you want to be, so that your outliers still function well. You heard me mention fin box. I'm not talking about the foil box here, but the actual fin box. This is FCS2, and it comes with a fin. The idea for this fin, number one, is to provide you for a handle. So rather than having a big, deep handle hole in it here that interrupts the flow, these little slots are much less interruptive, allows a more efficient ride, and lightens the board up. It also gives you the option to have that fin in or out, so you can choose whether you need a handle or not. Personally, I usually don't need one. But the other thing it does when you have a fin in here is it gives you a little bit more drive, and it gives you more directional stability when your board is on the water. So especially in light winds, or for newer riders, that can really help you so the board isn't quite as squirrely. It creates more forward drive, and the more forward drive you have, the easier it is to push against that and gain apparent wind and stay upwind. On a board like this, I can stay upwind even if I never get on foil, and that's a pretty unique thing for a board that's under 6 feet. I attribute a lot of that to the hard rails, but also that fin when I do have it in place for those light wind days. So that's something unique that Omen is doing that I haven't seen on any other boards, and it really does have a great effect. It's nice that you can use or not use it. It's not something that's permanently affixed to the board all the time. Give you all a quick look at the side here, since I was talking about the rocker line. You can see what I'm talking about. This doesn't go flat, 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 bam, big kink. That's gonna push water like a snowplow. This thing is really mellow coming through and just really nicely blended in a natural curve through the middle of the board there. And then the tail, you'll see starting right behind the foil box, just starts a little flip there. That helps ground your feet into the board. It's almost like laying in a hammock in the middle if you're thinking about it in an extreme way. But it lowers the center of gravity and gives you stability both side to side, but also front to back when you're on this board. So it's a lot more stable than you would imagine. It also helps, as I mentioned, with that controlled flow out the back of the board. A smooth, non-interrupted flow is always going to be the fastest, always going to be the most efficient. And then obviously when your nose starts to come up and release, that way it's naturally still planing off that tail section rather than dragging at liftoff, which slows you down and can cause you to stall and fall back into the water. So that's the Omen Flux, some of the details you got there. On this particular model, we do see the leash plug move to the deck as opposed to the back end of the tail where it had been on some of the Flux models. That's a good thing, especially on a bigger board like this. It's a more secure hold. There's less issues with it being there. So there'll be fewer instances where you need to repair the leash plug or worry about the leash plug pulling out in really heavy conditions. That's the Omen SuperMarine here, 95 liters. As I mentioned, I've been riding it quite a bit. Helping design this is something I've been dying to get on. Obviously you have an idea in your mind. Greg and I talked it to death, and in comparisons of the Flux and the Emissary and other boards in the market and where we thought it should be, and fine-tuned all the details on the placement of your strap, of your fin box, of your foil box, and all of that stuff. So it's a heavily refined board, even though it is a first-year model, I would say. And it'll be interesting to see how it's been received. But what I can tell you is I have loved this board from the first time I jumped on it. 95 liters for me is a little big, but I can tell you it feels a lot smaller when you're up in foil ripping around, but it still has that excellent low end range that we were aiming for, that ease of use we were aiming for. I've ridden this on 3-meter pair wings, which are just notoriously hard to get going as a heavier rider like me. And I can just kind of slowly build speed and plane on the water. Sometimes it might take me 50 yards to just kind of, find that sweet spot and pump and build speed, and you're just kind of inching, 1 degree or 1 mile per hour, 2, 3, 4, 5, 4, 4, 4, 4, 5, 6, and lift off. This board keeps momentum, and that is key, just to keep you going, to be ready. So when that extra little bit of power hits, when that extra little gust hits, bam, you're off and riding. You don't need to quick try to get it and quick accelerate and try to do everything right and you're in a panic. No, this thing just keeps rolling until you're ready to lift off and goes. So it's surprisingly easy on the low end. The stability is really excellent. Anytime you're talking about, a higher volume board around your weight in kilograms, sometimes it can get weird and quirky, especially with a narrower width or a shorter length. This one's a little on the long side for a 95 liter, but it's still, a relatively compact board as compared to, downwind boards, which would be, almost 2 feet longer than this in a lot of cases. This offers a lot of stability and ease of use for its size and dimensions, which is really what we were hoping to get, where you can ride a 95 liter and have it be a really fun maneuverable wingboard and not have to necessarily resort to a downwind all the time, or in most cases. As a heavier rider, I'm kind of a moderately heavier rider, 195, 200 pounds. This time of the year I'm over 200 pounds with all my wetsuit stuff on for sure. But I can tell you this is a phenomenal one-board quiver, especially if you live in somewhere like an inland lake or lower winds, or maybe you're just still learning. You can get up and ride, but you haven't nailed any jibes yet and you kind of struggle riding on natural stance. This is a great board to jump into for that range, and it's a board you'll grow into as you get better and appreciate it as you get better, rather than kind of growing out of the board and then disliking it. So I think it's uniquely suited for those riders and those people that want to buy one board for a huge range of conditions, even as they're progressing from a beginner to even an advanced level. This is going to continue to deliver. In terms of versatility, it's also fantastic for that. As I mentioned, I've been para-winging on this board quite a lot. A lot of times para-winging, you're in mixed conditions, maybe the conditions are a little light, and of course you always want to fly the smallest wing that you can, so it really just packs down small and easy. You're only up on it for a second and then you're putting it away. So this board has allowed me to ride smaller para wings, more easily without having the dreaded sinker effect. You don't need to go out completely overpowered and lit and out of control just to get your board up. It's really easy to hunt around and chill and just sit on this board if you're figuring out a tangle or something, and then take off really easily again. But then, as I mentioned, when you're up on foil, it feels a lot smaller. If I had to quantify it, I would say this board feels like most 70-liter boards in the market right now. And a lot of that has to do with the width, the central stance area, just the total foil of this board swings through the wind so cleanly. Up here, it's a lot thinner. It's got that hulled shape that just swings through everything really clean and light. It's a lightweight board. So it just feels smaller than it really is once you're up on foil, which is the goal with something like this. You don't want to feel like you're riding an 8-foot 2x4, you know, out there, and you have to wait for that thing to come about and it's, and now I want to go the other way and, you know, it's not that. It's got more slippy carvy out there. So it's a really fun board. I've even played with this board a little bit now with prone downwinding and prone riding. Granted, you know, it's twice the size that I would typically ride in terms of volume for a lot of prone days. It's still fantastic. It works really well. You can still pump back out, but you're gonna catch waves like you're on a longboard. You're gonna catch everything out there on the horizon. You can definitely catch waves that aren't breaking if you know what you're doing. And this is a phenomenal board if you want to kneel paddle or hand paddle with knees. Personally, I haven't supped on these. For me at 200 pounds, even the 105 is probably a little too small for me. I'm more of a prone guy, but I'm sure there are some good paddleboarders out there that would really like the 105 at my weight, or even the 95 liter if you're a smaller, lighter weight rider. So that is the Omen SuperMarine, and I am loving it. Personally, I could see this board in my quiver here as a light wind, para-wing, kind of do-it-all model. As a more advanced rider, I would say this is a little overkill for me in winds over 20 knots, in big waves. Not that I couldn't ride it in that, and I have quite a bit already, but I could size down on those days and gain a little bit of performance in jumping, in a little bit of the surfiness, jumping down to a Flux 60 liter or an Emissary 55. You know, once it gets good in surf is a nice thing to do, but if I had to pick one board, this would probably be it, because I can go out no matter what. It can be 8 knots, it can be 40 knots, and I can go out and have fun. I can wing it, I can para-wing it, I can prone it, you know. It has a lot of options. Obviously, I can foil drive this board. If you're a brand new foil driver, this is a fantastic option with the length, a little bit more volume. You're gonna be able to ride any foil in your quiver on it with quite ease, without having to worry about, you know, really laying off the nose and being all technical with what foils you can use at what speeds and what waves and all that. Having just a set it and forget it kind of board, there's something special to be said about that. So that is the Omen SuperMarine. As always, we like to kind of poke at any negatives on any product we're doing a review. If there's an issue with the Omen, I would say it's twofold. Number one, there's only 2 sizes, 95 liter and 105 liter. And of course, we do have a lot of other size options in the Emissary or Flux. So there are quite a wide variety of options, but personally, I think there's room for bigger versions of the SuperMarine. I think there's potentially room for something a little smaller in this same realm, because I think there are some lighter riders that could benefit from that. But we'll see. I think primarily larger sizes, especially if guys want to paddleboard with them, or if we get some really heavy new riders that also want to ride in light wind, there's probably room for a 125 or a 130 here to help make sure the offering is complete for anyone that wants an Omen board. Lastly, I would say price is a thing. Okay, and I'm gonna go on a little tangent here, but this isn't the cheapest board you can buy in the market. Granted, I would say this is probably a board that when you amortize the cost for how long you're gonna use it, how long the board lasts, how low the repair costs are, and how much you love it, it's gonna be the cheapest board you ever buy. Reason for that, number one, it's a design that you can use for almost anything in any condition, so you're gonna use it a lot. Secondly, the construction from Apple Tree on these Omen boards is second to none in my opinion. You can repeatedly beat the crap out of these, repair them quickly and easily, and continue to ride it with really no adverse effect. EPS boards, you ding the crap out of it, you get it out of the water, it's sucked up a certain amount of water, you gotta really dry that board out. No matter what you do, a certain amount of that water vapor stays in the board forever, eating away at the core slowly. And what's gonna happen is eventually you'll have so many repairs and so many little dings that you're rebuilding that the board just keeps taking on weight, and the more water gets in the board, the more beat up it gets and just feels kind of dead. If you're a skateboarder, you know, your brand new boards have great pop, they feel very lively. If you're a kiter, you know what that feels like to have those brand new springy lines that just feel so lively and reactive. Boards are the same way. They flex and rebound. The weight has an effect on how the board moves and swings, and a board feel can definitely change a lot over time. These boards, I've dinged one on my Flux last year. I waited 4 months, probably 25 sessions on that board with it gashed open in the water, staying in my truck, you know, in the sun, doing all kinds of stuff. Didn't pick up an ounce of weight. The damage didn't get worse at all. The repair was still just as easy to do. And then once it was repaired and sewn up, the repair is so simple and easy that the board really didn't pick up hardly any weight, at least not measurable weight, maybe a half of an ounce or something. Crappy scale I was using, but the idea is that you can keep the board forever if you want to. And then if you do decide you want something different and go to resell it, the resale value is a lot higher. So that's an important consideration with any board. If you're really looking to invest in a board that you can keep for a long time and make it worth the price, the Omen boards, the Apple Tree boards are really hard to go wrong there, especially if you're making a smart choice on a model in size that you can kind of grow into or use for multiple different applications rather than just one little, niche-y thing. It's like, yeah, my 30-liter board is great, but I can only, I only really want to ride it, I should say, maybe 5 times a year. Any other day there's something, that maybe works a little easier or better, and you end up not riding it that much. You might end up paying a couple $100s every time you ride a board like that. This one, you're gonna ride the hell out of it. It's gonna really be a great value once you realize how long you keep and love this board. And honestly, we should sell these things on payment plans over the course of like 20 years, like a mortgage, because they do last that long. They do continue to give you high level performance even years later. The Flux I'm on now, I haven't had to upgrade. I haven't had any want to upgrade. It still rides like the day I bought it, even a couple hundred sessions later, years later. So it's pretty cool to have that in a board that you can really invest in and feel good about. It is a full carbon construction, so day bags are nice to use. Obviously it's black, clear carbon. So leaving this bake on a 100-degree day on the hot, sunny sand is, somewhat okay, but epoxy does break down from UV exposure and heat. So really that's your biggest enemy. If you're not gonna be in the water with this board, I would suggest it be in the shade or in a day bag. I'd say the same thing about any board that we sell, unless it's made of stone or something. It's gonna break down over UV exposure and high heat. They're not meant to bake inside your car at 500 degrees or sitting on a beach at 250 degrees in direct sun. So plan on that. If you're buying a board like this, find a good day bag or plan to put it in the shade. Don't leave it, in an extremely hot situation, as with any board. So that's that. This has been Tucker with Mac Kite. If y'all have any questions about these boards, please reach out to us. We've ridden them all, had a lot of experience. We'd love to match you up with whatever one might work best for you.